Hello, everyone, and welcome to Health and Happiness at Work. This podcast is for busy working adults trying to figure out how to better take care of themselves and others. My name is Katie, and I will be your host. We are here today because adulting is hard and because busy working adults spend more time at work than anywhere else. We're going to have real conversations about real life and, most importantly, swing into action on the biggest opportunities. We're going to talk about ways to layer health, fitness, and wellness directly into your workday so that you feel fantastic. I cannot wait to dive deeper into each of these topics related to health and happiness. You are not alone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 4, where we will explore tools and tactics for what I am calling fail-proof fitness efforts. Again, as always, we have messages for busy working adults. So my business, Wellness Collective, we specialize in stepping into the workday, helping the individual team members, helping the leadership, helping the workplace culture. And so we are really targeting adults who are working and trying to do all the things and take great care of themselves. So I am thrilled to be here today with an incredibly special guest. I'm going to kind of build it up here for you. And you're going to hear his sexy voice in the background. He's a former NFL football player. He's a phenomenal fitness professional. He's both my colleague and a fellow small business owner. He's a father. Get this, he's a grandfather. And I know for a fact that he's a super fun guy to hang out with at happy hour. So yes, fun and fitness can absolutely coexist. So without further delay, I want to introduce you to Wellness Collective team member and entrepreneur, David Key.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
It's great to be here.
Awesome. David and I, full disclosure, are still caffeinating. So hopefully you experience that with us. So, David, please take whatever time you like to tell everyone a little bit more about yourself. It's
Sure.
Quite a career.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of careers, I've been in the fitness industry for 30 years now. So, quite a long time. Certainly have seen a lot of changes in the industry, which is one of the things I love about it. As we gain new information, as the science changes, you always have to keep on top of it to stay one step ahead of competition. But a little about myself, born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. Was fortunate enough to be a good athlete, and I went to the University of Michigan on a full-ride scholarship, playing under a guy that a lot of football circles know, Bo Schembechler.
Oh, yeah.
Played for him for 4 years, 4 Big Ten championships in a row. So I had a pretty illustrious career. Did well enough that I gained the attention from the NFL. I was drafted by the New England Patriots. And got bounced around the league for about 3 years exactly. I was a blue-collar NFL guy. So, finally got smart and said, if I could make a little bit of money off the field, then it would be time for me to walk away. So that back in those days, we weren't making as much money, so that was a little bit easier to do.
I bet.
But I literally I was in between teams, got released by New England. I walk into a fitness club. And I tell them, look, I'd love to be a personal trainer. My degree's in kinesiology. What kind of job opportunities do you have? And the guy stopped me right there. He said, look, if you really are serious about the fitness industry, don't be a personal trainer. Be one of my salespeople. Let me teach you the business. And I literally learned the business from that experience. And I was with that company for about 1.5 years. I was their number one salesperson in the country. They send in a crew and they say, look, we love what you're doing. We want to revamp everything we're doing from a sales standpoint based upon some of your techniques. And I'm like, well, cool. Somebody realizes my talent. They see that I know what I'm doing. How much do I get paid for my idea? They say, oh, that's part of your employment. I said, oh, really? Wrote my letter of resignation literally right there that day. Left, moved back to Columbus, Ohio, and been doing it since. So it was a nice short ride. In fact, when I got drafted to New England, backing up from just to fill in some gaps. When I was at the University of Michigan and Stanford were the only colleges that even had a degree in kinesiology.
Wow.
So, exactly. So now some people were studying it, they had classes for it, but we had an actual kinesiology school. So literally every specialist this side of the Mississippi was right there at the University of Michigan. So, you can tell when you've got an expert in your field. In addition to that, my strength coach for football was actually a professor in the kinesiology school. So it's one thing to sit there and learn it on paper, but then to drag your behind down to that football building and actually have it done to you, you gain a little bit better understanding for it. And then when I was drafted by New England, my head strength coach was a guy named Frank Hatfield, who started the ISSA. I think he does the ACE certification, actually wrote it himself.
All right.
So to actually have that guy in your camp with a degree in kinesiology, with everything that I learned, and I'm sure he got sick of me. I was picking his brain every single day, realizing that, this NFL thing was going to be short term. Eventually, I'm going to have to start a career, though I had no idea that I was going to go into the field in the way that I did. And it's surely been a good ride. Like I said, 30 years, have owned my own business, bricks and sticks, but I much prefer to be in the position I'm in now, working for someone.
Well, it sounds like you had an amazing experience being at that particular school,
Absolutely.
surrounded by all the best people in the field or the industry. So that's amazing. I was kind of giggling because as a small business owner, and doing sales myself, people always say, look for athletes, hire athletes because they make great salespeople. And I said, really? Because you meet so many people who you mention the word sales and it feels kind of icky.
Right.
But like sales is actually, it can be very thrilling and exciting. So I don't want to go down that path too much, but I do want to kind of then say athletes are, I think, a special breed. And so I hope in today's podcast, we can learn from the athlete's mindset, but then how do we make that digestible for people
Right.
who do not identify as an athlete
Exactly.
yet? So how do we learn from athletes, even if that's not our current experience, is kind of where I'm headed. So I decided to call this particular episode Failproof Fitness. And so then I said to David, do you like that? What do you think about that? And I almost wish we would have recorded it because we had a heart-to-heart on what we thought about those words. So I'll walk you through my logic for why I liked this direction, and we'll kind of talk about the idea of failing. Some people say fail forward. I like that too. But if you look up the word failproof, it actually means resistant to failure. So you could interpret that, I think, a few different ways. But the reason I like it so much is that, to me, it kind of gives this impression of bottomless restarts is where I'm headed. And I think people shy away from failure, understandably. But then David and I were just talking about how in fitness, it's actually a good thing. It's actually a best practice to push yourself to failure. So we kind of have to be careful with this word because we want to look at it a few different ways. So pushing yourself to fatigue and putting those demands on your body can be a really healthy thing. And if it is enough demand and enough challenge, it'll produce some change in the body. And that's
Right.
ultimately what people are looking for. So what I'm really talking about with failure is we meet just a ton of people who are frustrated because they can't seem to stick with it. They can't seem to figure it out. They can't seem to adopt it as part of their lifestyle and actually enjoy the process or experience. Or maybe they have done those things, but they're reaching some kind of plateau. So that's kind of where I'm headed.
Sure. When you say failure, I think of it more in the macro than the micro. Surely failure is a good thing from an exercise standpoint. That's how we recruit dormant muscular fibers. I could go on with the science of it. When we are exercising at fatigue is where we actually get those results. But when I'm thinking from a macro standpoint, when we say fail proof, I'm saying getting some techniques going that ensure that the exercise program that you're on or whatever wellness program you've developed for yourself, that you are always headed in the right direction and always being able to accomplish goals and being goal-oriented or having a program that allows you to actually fall down sometimes. I mean, one of the things that I remind my clients is you're never going to be 100%. Nobody can peak perform every single day. Why am I in what I call a Western mentality of thinking that every time I go to the gym, every time I do an exercise program, I've got to be absolutely 100% on it. It's got to be more difficult than the next time. That is simply a road to burnout and injury. We got to allow ourselves some time in order to fall down a little bit, knowing that some days you're not going to peak perform. But that's actually helpful from my standpoint. And I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later. But a lot of times when you fall, that teaches you more lessons about yourself and how to get back up than if you were successful all the time. And
Right, right. So that's kind of where I'm headed with this idea of anything that you do or try could be considered fail-proof because it's information.
Sure.
Whatever you do and try, even if it doesn't go to plan and it quote unquote feels like a failure, it's really not, because you're learning what didn't work for you. You're learning what your boundaries are, what your stumbling blocks are, what your obstacles are. And so to me, that's insight.
Sure.
So everything you try, everything that works and doesn't work, it's all information. It's all going to inform your strategy or your fitness efforts go forward, applying what you've learned.
Sure. And speaking on that topic, one of the first things I do with an individual when I start with them is, number one, make sure that we are defining success the same way.
That's right. Yeah.
Like I mentioned, the Western mentality, I try to wind people out of that because, quite frankly, people are putting way too much pressure on themselves in order to be successful. It's much more simpler than people make it. For example, I've got what I call the tripod of fitness, where everybody knows about your exercise and your diet. The third leg of that tripod is your rest. If my tripod is uneven, I can't sustain any type of results. And that's one place that is really ignored, is the rest portion of your exercise program. I mean, heck, for example, I had a client yesterday. Oh, what did you do for your cardio yesterday? Oh, I did about 60 minutes on the treadmill. How much sleep did you get? I only got 4 hours last night. Now, what I informed is that, yeah, you did 60, but you probably only got about 40 minutes of work out of that because you're sleep deprived. So it makes a big difference in making sure that we have a balanced fitness program, that people understand that I don't need to work that hard all the time. By far, the absolute number one successful exercise program is more about frequency than it is the actual intensity of your work. And the greatest thing about it, everything counts. All you got to do is move. One of my favorite stats in fitness is that if you are doing an accumulated 60 minutes of exercise per week, doesn't matter how you do it or how you get it in. If I'm walking my dog 3 times a week for 20 minutes, that fits the bill. If I'm jumping up and down on the bed for 60 seconds, 60 times a week, that fits. If you are doing just a 60 minutes accumulated exercise, you lower your rate of heart disease and diabetes by 150%.
Yeah. And I try to remind people that all the time, because people have these limiting beliefs about what justifies or qualifies as a workout, and it actually holds people back.
Exactly.
And Emma and I, another colleague of ours, we were joking the other day that the 15 minutes that you did blows away the 30 minutes that you didn't do.
Right.
And people, somehow can't get going because they think it's not enough. So with that, I'm really glad you brought up the rest piece, because I want to make sure I don't overgeneralize and assume that everybody listening falls into that category of having a hard time getting started. Because David and I anticipate, have both also met people who go and push so hard, and there's restrictive eating habits and there's excessive compulsivity to do more and more and more, and these people are not giving their bodies a chance to rest and recover.
And then really putting themselves under duress. I mean, most people are aware of cortisol. Oftentimes, some of the stats that we see for people who are overworking out, they're producing so much cortisol that their workouts become relatively ineffective.
I cannot believe you just brought that up. Or maybe I can, because you're a super smart guy. But I was chatting with a new person in my network. She's a physician. She really specializes in metabolic panels and looking at things at the cellular level. And she said she meets endurance athletes all the time who are frustrated, and they're like, man, I can't move this belly fat. I just did a marathon. And she's like, your body is under so much distress that it's out of balance, And
since I was involved with a scientific study that they took some hormonal profiles of people who were exercising too much, people who were on some crazy fad diet, people that were in war zones. And all of those look very similar.
Oh, wow.
That you're under that kind of duress when you're exercising too much or on a super restrictive diet. And speaking on that subject, anytime you're eliminating whole food groups from your diet, it's probably not a good diet.
That's right.
All macros count. At the end of the day, it still comes back to input, output. Obviously, there are a million different ways to do it, but we've got to be look at diet a little bit more critically than we typically do, and that just doesn't mean eating less. That is the first thing people do is start decreasing their calories. Heck, we can make your body burn more calories by not changing your diet at all. It's just a matter of changing foods, getting them in the right place. But again, that's why I'm here. If it was easy, like you said, people commonly beat themselves up about falling off. If it was easy, we'd be unemployed.
That's right. There are absolutely thousands of people who are still looking for guidance, still looking to sort it out, and I think most importantly, still working to make it a part of their lifestyle so it's sustainable. So where I think we should go next is a little bit of a chat around mindset, because I do think that there's a greater population of people struggling to stick with it and give themselves love and grace in the process than those individuals who are exercising consistently, because the metrics are there, right? We know that 2/3 of the United States is overweight or obese, and there's infinite reasons why that is, a number of reasons why people are overweight, but we meet many of those individuals who would like a different outcome, and so they're coming to us for guidance. So let's go this direction of mindset. And David, I apologize if I made this up, but I don't think that I did. I distinctly remember you once saying that we, meaning all people, get infinite restarts.
Yes.
I call that being relentless, like
Yes.
relentlessly beginning again, relentlessly starting again. I like to say that every meal is an opportunity, every day is a new opportunity, every morning. And I think when people operate from that mindset of looking at the opportunity, learning from the past, and are relentless about beginning again, that is a massive game changer. So, David, when I say mindset work, what comes up for you?
Yes. I've been fortunate, similar to your stories. It was something that was ingrained in me super early. When I was 9, 10 years old, I had my cousin who lived right next door to me. He was the sprint coach at Ohio State for a D1 school. So, here I am going to practices with him at 9, 10 years old, not understanding that I should not be keeping up with college athletes. But my mentality was nobody told me that I shouldn't be able to. So I'm out there doing sprint drills with these guys who were, 19, 20 years old. That kind of wound itself into a work ethic that I learned super early. I had an epiphany about my second week into doing personal training professionally that I couldn't believe that I didn't understand how everybody didn't want to work that hard or didn't have the capacity to. So I quickly had to, change my mind state, get back to base about, okay, how do I motivate an individual who's never experienced fatigue in the way that I have? How do I get them to a place to get them comfortable? One of the things I jokingly tell my clients is it's my job to help you find comfort within your discomfort. And getting to a place where you're okay with being tired. It's not the end of the world. You're not going to fall down and die, but it is also expanding your lung capacity, your endurance. Every time I hit that threshold, and which should not be done on every single workout, but every time I hit that threshold, I'm getting a little bit stronger, a little bit better, a little bit more fit. So, commonly what I try to do, Einstein, one of my favorite sayings by him is that you cannot match the frequency of a thing in the physical world and not be that thing. So what I remind people, put yourself in a position around like-minded people who are fitness-minded, who are doing their workouts, who are positive. Do that self-talk to yourself. Even if you don't mean it, just by forming those words, you are one step closer in order to be consistent with your exercise or to be able to achieve your goal. Kind of fool yourself into thinking. If you don't believe that your mind controls your body, try it. If for 6 or 7 days, just have that self-talk. I have a technique that I always practice. I teach younger trainers. Anytime I'm in a facility with a client, something like that, anything negative that comes, it presents itself, always cover it with a positive. And you almost get in the habit of doing that all the time. So
nip it in the bud.
erase that negativity from your scenery. Life just becomes a lot easier just by putting yourself in that frame of mind, making that habit. Heck, studies have shown you do a thing for 14, 21 days. Now there's a neural pattern that reinforces that behavior. Speaking on that, because of that, that goes both ways. We commonly talk about the negative portions of neural response, but we can create positive neural response. Here's a good example. Story I tell all the time, use it as an analogy. I had a client who is eating great every single day, killing it. Workouts, doing well. But when she would go and pick up her kids from school, could not help herself but get into their snacks that she feeds them after school. So, of course, she's beating herself up about,
I laugh because I'm a mom and it's a thing. Sorry. I'm not laughing at her. I am with her in this struggle. I am with her.
But that same mom, she got up in the morning. She ate a good breakfast. She packed her clothes because she knew she had to come to that workout. Still can't discipline herself to get out of those cookies. She's beating herself up about her discipline. But it's not her discipline, it's your neural pattern. Your body, you've been doing that for 5, 6, 7 years. Your body knew 2 hours ago that you were going to get into those cookies.
I'm going to interject real quick because
Yes.
I'm just very excited about what you're saying. There's a saying that neurons that fire together wire together.
That. I stole that. I totally stole that from you, and I use it all the time. Absolutely.
Fire together, wire together. So anything you do on repeat, picture like a little twist tie.
Yep. Absolutely.
Bringing it together, and it happens on repeat. Now, I just want to rewind a little bit too, and thank you for everything you just said, because I did not ask David to say these things, but he basically just recapped like so many other episodes in terms of the power of self-talk, in terms of the power of a sense of belonging and who you surround yourself with. And I have watched amazing sense of community in fitness centers and studios and gyms, and people can feel intimidated or overwhelmed walking in that first day. But if it is the right fit and you're with people that are filled with positivity, people who are excited to see you, there's that strong social component. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy to see you here today. We missed you last week. Right. That is transformational in terms of that person being excited and willing to show up. So who you surround yourself with, whether it's in business or life or fitness,
huge,
can either build you up
Absolutely.
Or bring you down. And some people have this sense of loneliness or isolation. And so finding this type of community is going to check a lot of boxes. It will help with that sense of belonging. It will help with building self-efficacy. It's going to help with mental health.
Absolutely. All those things.
And I love what you said about positivity, because Laura and I were talking about this last month. We're sort of wired for the negative. We're wired for the potential threats in life, and we're wired to protect ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But like you mentioned, if you catch yourself saying rough or unkind things about yourself, you can pause in that moment and try to rewrite.
Absolutely. And what's interesting also, most people are unaware of that self-chatter that goes on inside them. Mm-hmm. And they really don't recognize it until you put it into their conscious thought. Speaking of those neural patterns too, pretty easy to break and pretty easy to create new ones. I mean, take that same analogy. Let's take that box of cookies and instead of putting it in the cabinet where you'll always find it, put it in a different part of the house. Maybe change the packaging, make it more difficult to get to. Now, you still may go get it, but that's a new neural pattern. We can break that out of discipline, but that old one that's been tracked in your neurons for years, that's much more difficult. But the solution is super simple.
Well, this is a perfect segue, because I wanted to make sure that we got into best practices.
Yes.
People love hearing what works, what might I try?
Mm-hmm.
And on that note about, it's almost like muscle memory or habitual patterns, I say the exact same thing. When I help people to quit smoking, my first tip for them is drive a different way to work.
Yes. Oh, that's huge.
And the reason for that is that their brain will have to turn on a little differently. And rather than going through the same gas station to get the same purchase of whatever their habit is, they're driving a different way. So it's engaging their brain a little bit differently. It's an opportunity to create a new pattern, a new pathway. And so my best practice is do your day differently. if you're trying to do your day the same as you always do it and fit something in, it might not stick. But if you seek out a new way of doing things, that could be a big opportunity.
Absolutely. And certainly, one of the things that, like we were talking, when I start with a client, getting back to the basic, we talked about the tripod of fitness. Out of your diet, the absolute most important is your hydration. Number one, if people just drank more water, their body would deal with their metabolism completely differently. If we get an opportunity, I'll go into my water sermon that pretty much scares people into drinking water. But,
well, I think it's time for the water sermon.
Well, let's do that before I start that. But hydration from a nutrition standpoint, obviously we talked about rest, getting enough rest, but also with your exercise, it's the frequency. Again, doesn't matter what you do, just do it consistently. But now, for all of my clients who don't drink water, I typically drop the water sermon on them. And I'll go the short route today. But obviously, water is very important for the body. Kind of think of water as your transport system. In order for me to get nutrients to my muscles and get things in the right places, have to be hydrated. Now, the body's pretty good about getting what it needs. And if you do not give your body enough water, it's going to go get it from some of its favorite aquifers. So it'll steal it from your muscles. That decreases your contraction. Your workouts aren't nearly as effective if you're not as hydrated. It'll steal it from your brain fluid. That slows down your hard drive.
It's no bueno.
Absolutely. And how everything works. You're just not thinking as clearly. The viscosity of your blood is controlled by your water. I mean, if you've ever tried to drink a milkshake with a coffee straw, it's almost impossible.
Ew.
Yeah, and you think that your body has about 800 miles of blood vessels to supply each. Imagine that you're drinking a milkshake through a coffee straw that's 800 miles long. All right, let's put some water in there.
This is really graphic, David.
Absolutely. Now, that not only makes it easier for your heart to move your blood, but also that increases your blood's capacity to store oxygen, which will have a direct effect on how you burn body fat. People don't realize 80% of the fat that we burn every day is burnt when you're doing absolutely nothing. So we want to work on that number just as much as your exercise. But the main reason you should drink your water is because your body's most favorite place to pull fluid from is your colon. And it will dip down in your colon and recirculate that water back through your system, putting more stress on your kidneys and your liver. And it is literally the equivalent of taking an empty cup, walking over to a dirty toilet, and flushing that back all day long.
Ew.
Taking shots of dirty toilet water all day long. Ooh, good. That one's got some corn in it. Let's get that.
Have you seen the Jimmy Fallon ew skit? I just want to go, ew.
Exactly. So if you don't want to drink toilet water all day, definitely keep yourself hydrated. Speaking of which, good hydration is anything above 64 to 85 ounces is about the standard.
Thank you, I think, for all of that. But what I love about where we are right now is that sometimes we have to go back to basics.
Absolutely.
And people are potentially not nailing the basics.
Mm-hmm.
What's hard about this conversation is that I worry that half of the listeners will roll their eyes and go, I already know that. And this goes back to like the thing I want to tattoo on people's foreheads, which is knowing is not the same as doing.
Yes.
Knowing and doing are two different things. If you're doing all the things and you're doing them consistently and you're still not seeing a result or producing a result, then we need to look at some other variables. I've seen people lose 100 pounds. And I remember telling a client about it, a couple of clients, like, oh my gosh, this person I know, she lost 100 pounds. And the first words out of their mouth is, oh my gosh, what did she do? And I said, get this. She started moving more and eating better.
Right. Back to basics.
And I don't want to say it's unsexy, but, unfortunately, our culture is wired for the quick fix, the magic bullet, the in and out, the get her done, the eat this, not that. And the eat this, not that really triggers me and pisses me off. So we're going to talk about that later. But let's keep going down this path of best practices. So we're crystal clear that there are dozens and dozens of metabolic processes in the body that demand water. And what I heard you say is the body gets real sluggish and real icky and real polluted
Yes,
if it doesn't have the movement,
exactly.
and it's
Exactly.
hydrated, and at the end of the day, at the cellular level, there's got to be enough water there to do
Absolutely.
the magical things that the human body does. So what else do you want to add to hydration
So, and
as
along
go-to?
with that, if you are 1% dehydrated, that has a 10% effect on your cardiovascular system. 10%. Now, most people are walking around about 1.5 to 2% dehydrated. At 3%, you actually start to hallucinate. Just to give you an example.
Well, I was thinking about this during the pandemic too. Think about how often people get hospitalized
Hmm.
and it comes back as dehydration and exhaustion,
Yes.
and they needed fluids.
Hmm.
They needed fluids. They they had to like pass out and get taken to the
Right.
hospital for fluids.
Right.
And I think about going to the doctor. You have any type of anything, whether it's viral, bacterial, I'm a little under the weather. The very first thing the physician will say is push fluids, push
Yep.
fluids, push fluids. Push fluids means drink more water.
Exactly.
So, anyways,
Exactly.
adding on, as you're going through your best practices, David, I'm curious which ones are maybe more things that you learned being an athlete
Wow. Yes.
that were instilled in you as an athlete, and best practices that you've just learned, obviously, working hands-on
Sure.
with folks.
Sure. Well, I have what I call the classic caddy rule. Caddy being short for Cadillac.
Oh,
People, they take better care of their vehicles than the vehicle that they're living in. You got to
Oh.
freaking live in that body the rest of your life. You better start taking care of it. Imagine if you were at 16 years old, you were granted a car and that was the only car you could ever own. You can never trade it in. You can't do it now. You can change the tires. You can change the oil. We have to do maintenance to our bodies in the same way. One of the sticking points that I always use is that if you are over 35 years old, every single workout you do better have some stem of preservation in it. Otherwise, you're tearing down. And it's a common mistake because conventional wisdom would tell us, well, if a person is falling out of shape, oh, well, I was in pretty good shape when I was 22, 25. I'll go back and do all that stuff. No, that window is closed. You go back and do that stuff, it's not going to work the same. You're in a completely different body now. Heck, our cellular, at a cellular level, we change our bodies every 2 years. So, which is something else I teach, is that if I really want to be in a brand new body, I've got to discipline myself for about 24 months in order to do it. Now, discipline doesn't mean that every single one of those days that I have to be spot on, but we do need a game plan and plan where your breaks are. If you don't, things are going to break where they're at their weakest. So I am a firm believer in, especially with diet, that you should always have 1 or 2 days where you can have virtually anything that you want. Now, because you give yourself that kind of grace, you're probably going to eat better. But from a mental standpoint, it's much easier to conceive that, okay, I only got to eat good until Friday rather than, sheesh, I got to do this until I get this weight off of me or whatever your
or
goal
in
may be.
perpetuity the rest of my life.
Exactly.
That's not sustainable.
That is not sustainable. And that is the biggest, when we talk about fitness, I'm always more talking about wellness. We want to make sure that we're doing things that you can incorporate into your lifestyle, that you can live that way. Those Biggest Loser shows and all that are just focused on weight loss, it almost sets us up for failure. Because we're looking at it from an entertainment standpoint, but it gives people the idea that in order for me to get those kind of results, I absolutely have to do this 4 or 5 hour workout every single day. And that's just not the case. Just not the case.
Yeah, that is like a fascinating thing about our culture, that we sit on the couch and eat and watch other people try to lose weight on a TV show.
Now, having said that, there are studies that show
Wild.
that watching exercise actually burns more calories than not. So there's
Yeah,
some benefit.
the mind. Speaking of the mind being a powerful and trippy place, so what I took away from what you just said is being disciplined is not the same as being perfect.
Absolutely, yes.
Being disciplined does not mean that you have to restrict and eliminate and prohibit certain things the rest of your life,
Right.
because that sounds terrible.
Right.
So it sounds like disciplined is having a groove. And I totally agree with this. It's this ability to go and experience food or a birthday or a holiday and enjoy
Absolutely.
and have this healthy relationship with your food and your body, and then wake up the next day and go back to what you normally do.
Exactly.
Now, it's easier said than done,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that's a really healthy place to land, is this ability to flex. And it's that flexibility that then provides discipline because you enjoy, and then you go back to your more typical day.
Yep. And then build a metabolism that can take the hit. So I mean, we
Ooh,
know
I like thinking of it like that.
absolutely, because we know that they're going to be party, they're going to be
I'm made for
events.
this.
Right, exactly, exactly. And you know, one of the things that is crazy, when I was doing bodybuilding shows, I was a IFBB pro for a number of years. One of the things that it would amaze me, because you're dieting for 6-8 weeks, you've got everything together, you're in your best shape, you hit the stage, and now all that's over. So, of course, the first thing I do is go have some of the things that I've been restricting. Might have a hamburger, a piece of pizza. An hour after I have that junk is when my body would look its best, just from throwing that cheap fuel in there and making you vascular. And it would absolutely drive me nuts. There were actually guys that competed that they would do that. They're backstage eating pizza and hamburgers and drinking beer before they go up on stage just to get that same. Exactly.
Who knew?
Right. Exactly. But when I say building a metabolism, take the hit, we talked about 80% of the fat we burn every day is burnt when you're doing absolutely nothing. So in order to build that kind of metabolism, you have to throw some junk in there every now and again so that your body doesn't get in a mode of always expecting good fuel. It's almost like throwing kindling on a fire. I mean, if I've got a nice, good metabolism and it's rolling along, and at the end of the day, what we really want to do from a management standpoint is get your basal metabolism to equal your diet. So let me back all the way up. Your basal metabolism is the amount of calories that it takes just to maintain life. So, of course, every movement that we make, every time we do a movement, your body's got to fuel itself off of calories. If I laid in bed for 24 hours and didn't move a muscle, still my body's feeding my muscles, I'm breathing, my heart's pumping. There's a caloric count that exists just to keep you alive. Now, if we can get that number to equal your diet, which in a lot of cases is relatively easy, then everything you do, your body considers it to be exercise. At the end of the day, still comes back to input, output. If my basal is handling my diet, every time I move, I'm operating out of my reserve tank. When I'm brushing my teeth, I'm burning body fat. And even throwing on top of that, we burn the highest percentage of fat at our lower intensity activities. For example, just sitting here, I'll use myself because I know the math. I'm about 200 pounds. Right now, I'm probably 7 or 8% body fat. Every 10 minutes, every 5 minutes, I'm burning about 10 calories just sitting here. Out of those 10 calories, at minimum, 9.5 of those are coming directly from my fat cells. Now, let's put me on a treadmill and run uncomfortably fast, getting to my maximum heart. Now, my caloric burn may kick up to 45, 50 in that same 10 minutes, but still, I'm probably burning 11, 12 calories coming from my body fat. So why am I wrecking myself in order to burn more fat when the difference between my rest and my exercise isn't much different? Now, there is a benefit to obviously burning more calories and leaving less to go into storage as the day goes along. But from a fat standpoint, there's not much difference. So rely on your metabolism to do its work. Think of it this way. Most people's bodies are about 5 or 6 quarts of fluid. Imagine if you had a 6-quart pot of water and you put it on a stove, how much energy would I have to add to that 6 quarts just to raise it by 1 degree? Right. Ton of energy. Your body's working that hard 24/7 all the time. There are a lot of things I do from an exercise standpoint that just affect your body temperature in order to make you burn more calories. Heck, you've seen me do some of my exercise. It is super rare for me to do an exercise class without a skull cap on. People think this guy's always saying, no, most of our heat is escaping from the head. I lock that in. Now my body's got to work harder. I may burn 10 to 12% more calories just by wearing a skull cap. Waist trainers are the same way. People think, okay, I'm going to put on this waist trainer to burn fat. No, there's no such thing as spot reduction. But what does happen, your organs, those are the most important things to your body. Your body will sacrifice many other things just to keep your organs and your brain alive. So if I make that area a little bit hotter from putting something over top of it, the body doesn't like that very much. It's going to do everything it can to regulate your temperature. Now it's got to work much harder in order to regulate that temperature. So, kind of play with your metabolism, thinking of it more of a way of what's on your autopilot rather than always relying on your exercise to do the same thing.
Well, kind of on a similar note, let's talk about the thermogenic effect of food.
Ooh, yes. Yeah.
Because I think many people don't understand that. They'll say, well, a calorie is a calorie. Well,
Not really.
not really, because of how hard your body potentially has to work once it's consumed. So let's talk a little bit about that.
So, thermogenic effect of foods. If I ingest 100 calories of a carbohydrate, I need to use about 6 of those calories just to process that 100. Where with a protein, if I ingest 100 calories, I've got to use 30 out of 100. I'm almost cutting my calories by 1/3 just by eating the right types of food.
Just by digesting that food.
Absolutely, just by digesting that food. And a lot of that has to deal with not only your protein synthesis, but also, of course, it has a thermogenic effect on your body. So I would not suggest anyone go strictly on an Atkins diet, but one of the reasons that Atkins diet it works so well because you're restricting calories without decreasing calories. Makes sense?
Well, my encouragement is just to focus on protein.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to eliminate the other macros, but if you're just really have a heightened awareness of more protein at each meal and snack, and you're prioritizing that, and that's kind of the base, and then you're filling in with carbohydrates based on activity level, healthy fats, that alone will do massive things for the metabolism.
And that is a super important strategy. When I start diet programs with a person, particularly women, what I tell them is first you want to have at minimum about 100 grams of protein per day.
That shocks people.
Absolutely. And making sure you're getting protein at each meal. And if you are tracking your protein macros and your total calories, everything else kind of falls into place.
That's what I think. All right, cool. I'm glad we agree. So there are infinite more episodes I think you and I could do together is where I'm landing. But I want to make sure we talk about a few other things before we wrap up today and give some final encouragement to our listeners. So let's talk a little bit about working with a personal trainer versus a strength and conditioning coach versus group fitness. Now, I'm going to interject and just say I'm a little biased because group fitness is my jam. I have loved group fitness for decades now. And so group fitness means class-based workouts where you've got potentially dozens or, many people gathering to work out together. And a key component of our work at Wellness Collective is taking group fitness programs into the workplace, into the workday, and watching how that builds community, watching how that makes it convenient to practice self-care, watching how people become more consistent, watching them celebrate successes, the rapport and relationships that we get to build with these folks. So anyways, I could go on and on about the power of group fitness, that social component, and how layering it immediately into the workplace and the workday is an amazing idea. But let's hear from you a little bit, David, on your thoughts on all
like
this.
you, it is definitely my favorite and kind of my forte. I kind of fell into group fitness. Same story of managing the club. I won't mention the name of the corporation, but managing that club. Notoriously, as you well know, instructors are famous for being late or not showing. So what ended up happening, I just stopped relying on them. I started teaching myself.
Oh.
Exactly. So that's kind of, started back in the old days doing step aerobics, and that quickly grew to water aerobics. I kind of pat myself on the back in that there is no format that I cannot teach. There's definitely no format I haven't taught.
Have you taught dance fitness?
Absolutely.
And
dance
I missed
fitness,
it?
Zumba, water aerobics, you name it. High,
David,
low.
I know what we're doing this weekend. We're having a dance party.
But I do love it, and for all those same reasons. I mean, it almost lends itself to that type of camaraderie. And even, when I was at Bricks and Sticks operation, aerobics classes were kind of like my loss leader because I realized that it would give that kind of appeal. When I first started business, and heck, of course, I thought I knew everything. I was about 25, 26 years old. People used to call me the Cheers of fitness. And it would drive me nuts for a while until I came to appreciate that. Look, people aren't just coming here to exercise. It's hard to be self-motivated. It's much easier if someone is counting on you. It's more of the accountability that motivates people. Look, I don't feel like going to the gym today, but I know Johnny's going to be there, and he's counting on me to be there, so we have our conversation like we do every single morning. I was fortunate enough where I had my business, I was right in the center of Bexley. And if you are familiar with the town, it is a crossroad of everything. So demographically, I probably checked every single box. And that was one of the things that I appreciated and also my clients appreciated. Here you are in a place that you've met somebody that otherwise you would have never run into. People all the way from, lower economic to multimillionaires working out in the same place and having that kind of camaraderie and getting along with people. So, at that time, I knew I was on to something, and it's obviously taken, a few decades to kind of hone that and sharpen it and get it laser focused to actually use it in order to help more people.
Yeah. And what I have heard for years and years and years from people is that people want to be with people.
Yes. Yes.
So we can have apps, we can have on-demand type of programs, and sure, they are helpful and convenient and that type of thing. But people benefit from being around people. And a major theme that keeps coming up with our corporate clients is this idea of accountability. People want accountability. They want to be a part of something. They want to know that you care and that you're waiting for them. And I see that happening in our programs, and that's amazing. And to be honest, and maybe David's a unicorn and this doesn't happen for him, but to be honest, sometimes the participants or the students are what get me, the teacher, excited to be there because
absolutely.
I do this for a living, and some days I'm tired and some days I'm burnt out, but I know people are expecting me, and I walk in that room and I see all these beautiful people, and I snap right out of whatever funk I'm in, and my adrenaline kicks in, and I get to be on stage, and then I'm with my tribe.
Absolutely.
So It works both ways. So just know you're giving life to the trainer, coach, instructor, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about one other thing that I have seen for the last 15 years that I hope we can rewrite history on a little bit. This is the idea of people being embarrassed or hesitant or unwilling to exercise in front of their colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thing.
It is.
It's a thing. And I wish it was different, but everyone's entitled to their own feelings and beliefs, but I have met people, especially in management type roles, leadership type roles, and they're like, nope, not going to do it, not going to sweat or be vulnerable in front of my colleagues. And I would just challenge that thinking, because I anticipate it comes from a place of, again, feeling uncomfortable. If you're not super confident making your way around the gym, you don't want to look like you don't know what's going on. I make a joke on that, though. I'm like, honestly, most of the people in the gym are staring at themselves. They're not even paying attention to what you're doing.
This is true. And
but
it's what I call setting the table, where anytime you walk into it, I'm speaking those neural patterns, if you notice that any sports team you've ever seen, in the Far East is a big technique with businesses where they do the same routine every time they start something. So when I'm in class doing the same warm-up, because you're tapping in regardless of how you arrived that particular day, what we're doing is setting the table to let your body know that there's something that's getting ready to happen. So going through that same neural pattern, by the time you get there, there's some days where I just freaking don't feel like teaching. But by the time I get through my warm-up and I start sweating a little bit, now we're right back in. And putting that more in a hat of when you get new people there and they see that people have a routine that they're have camaraderie with, that you're encouraging that within your warm-up or however you're beginning a class, it almost becomes contagious. It just becomes a pattern that people commonly fall into. And again, your class attendance goes up, the quality of your classes go up, because anytime you're there, boom, you hit that neural pattern, you're peak performing regardless of how you arrive, how tired you are.
Man, you were saying all the right things today, David, because, Laura, our mental health specialist, talks about how regulating to the system it is to have routines and rituals, and it provides kind of that safety and stability of like, okay, this is what we're doing now. And so, so I think if leaders and decision makers and supervisors, and it's an amazing way to build rapport. And Brene Brown, an expert in the field of social work and research, there's a lot of power in being vulnerable. By putting yourself out there a little bit, then other people will feel willing and able to do the same, and then everybody wins. I just like to kind of normalize this idea of we can work out directly within the workday and it's not weird. Like sometimes people don't want to do stretches or exercises at their desk because they're like, oh, people are looking at me. And I'm like, what if the weird people are the ones that don't move their bodies?
Exactly.
Like your body's built to move. So how about we make it weird to sit all day? That's what's friggin' weird. Right. We're not on this planet to be professional sitters.
But I've always marveled in the just the variety of people that come to classes, and everybody's on a different fitness level. And even though I may be teaching the same, giving alternative exercise, things like that, again, one of the things that I tell people when I start a class, I'm going to do this relatively. I'll give you all of the adjustments, but I'm going to do this relatively intense. That doesn't mean you have to. There's nothing worse than. You packed your bags, you plan on getting there, you go to a class, and it doesn't quite give you what you need. So I have a tendency, I've had that happen to me, and it's just a horrible feeling. I have a tendency to overkill in that way. But there is a definite entertainment value associated with what we do. And if you don't have at least a piece of that, you're missing out on it. Because exercise it shouldn't be drudgery. You shouldn't have, I got to go do this workout. It should be something that you look forward to.
It should be, I get to work out.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I tell you what, this was another message I wanted to include today so we can kind of start to wrap up, is it's this idea that if you do have a healthy body and you are able to move freely in your body and have the use of your body, don't take that for granted.
Right. Oh, man.
Your body is something to celebrate and to respect and to appreciate. And then I also have some words of encouragement for those who I call them have bad parts. And I don't think that people have bad parts, but people will tell me I have bad knees. I have a bad back. I have my saddest thing is bad wrists. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you use your wrists all day, every day, So people will tell me I have these bad parts and they will feel like they can't do things.
Uh-huh. And
so
automatically, mentally, they have already limited themselves.
Yeah. And so my encouragement to you, and hopefully, David, you can kind of encourage this in your own kinesiology language. The body adapts if given the opportunity. The body heals if given the opportunity. When I work with someone who's been a smoker and they've smoked for 50 years, I'm like, I don't care how many years it's been. Your body will heal itself.
Excellent.
And the key word is if given the opportunity. But don't strip that opportunity from it. Anything that has blood flow can improve. So what are your words there?
It always seems to come back to balance, particularly with ailments. I've got a wrist hurt and things like that. First thing that as a kinesiologist that I'm looking at is how balanced are you? And symmetry has everything to do with it. Heck, if I'm having bad knees, it's not because genetically I have bad knees. Maybe my quads are much stronger than my hamstrings because I haven't been doing training or I haven't paid attention to those things. So oftentimes, a lot of things can be cured. The cases that I love is when a doctor has told them, look, you're going to be lacking mobility for the rest of your life. Your back is just way too bad. Nope, come on over here.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Like,
and I think
we always have options.
Always.
I mean, you and I could talk about 30 minutes and I'd get real fired up about this topic because some situations in the body, yes, there's been trauma, accident, injury, whatever. But some situations in the body are a result from underuse.
Yes.
Or I don't want to say neglect, but like if you don't use your parts, they certainly don't get stronger.
And when you think about it, the human body is made to move. If you are not moving, you are dying. Period.
I worked with this coach out in Boulder, and he said my biggest recommendation to people, and this is especially good for the wrists, is he said, you should touch the floor every day. And I was like, that is so simple. I go, and in my head, I'm like, well, I touch the floor a lot. So I'm like, all right. I was like celebrating, but then I was like, wait, he's right. There are people, which this blows my mind because of what we do for a living. There are people that go all day long and never touch the floor with their hands or their knees or any,
or
and I'm like.
Months and months without moving.
Yeah. And we know that you have to give weight. You have to do weight-bearing exercises. Your joints have to have those experiences. They'll get stronger and more capable. Anyways, I get very fired up about that.
Yes, of course.
So if you are feeling frustrated by something you're currently navigating, come to David and I, and we will scoop you up and cheer you on and help you to get your parts functioning and you feeling good about yourself inside and out. So with that, I mean, I feel like this has been a very productive conversation, and I feel like we can absolutely come back and revisit this topic. And what I always tell the listeners is the more we hear from you and the more feedback we get, the more responsive we can be and how we approach this next time. And that's really the cool thing about the creative process. Like, I don't have the whole year mapped out and next year mapped out about what we're talking about. I prefer to work organically. I prefer to hear what people are saying and what's supportive. So hit us up. Let us know. So David at wellnesscollective.com, Katie, Katy at wellnesscollective.com. You can comment, you can post, you can share, you can follow us. How else can people find you, David?
Oh, they can also find me on Facebook at David Russell Key or Instagram. I believe I am David Keybody.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. It'll pop up.
Yeah, we'll get you together. All right, awesome. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will be back soon.